You know, some people seem to have it all. We're talking wealth, charm, even royal favor, only to lose absolutely everything for a cause they believe in. Well, that is the exact story we're diving into today, the tragic arc of Richard Lovelace. So let's do it. Let's look at the last famous Cavalier poet, Richard Lovelace. We're going to trace his journey from the incredible heights of King Charles's court all the way down to the grim depths of poverty and prison. It's a heck of a story that shows how a powerful spirit, captured in just a few famous lines, can end up outliving a lifetime of hardship. Okay, so first things first, what exactly is a Cavalier poet? Now, these guys weren't just writers. They were fierce supporters of King Charles I during the English Civil War. At a time when the country was tearing itself apart, their poems were all about their worldview, celebrating honor, love, and above everything else, loyalty to the king. And Richard Lovelace? He was the poster boy for this entire movement. And you know, at the start, his life was basically a perfect mirror of his poetry. He was born into incredible privilege, and honestly, it looked like he was just destined for a life of effortless greatness. I mean, look at this. It reads like a checklist for the perfect 17th century gentleman, right? He had it all: money, a top-tier education, and serious charisma. A writer at the time even called him the most amiable and beautiful person that ever I beheld. The king and queen themselves were so impressed that they asked Oxford to give him a master's degree when he was just 18 years old. He was, in every single way, a star. But of course, that golden age, well, it just couldn't last. As England spiraled into civil war, the one thing that defined Lovelace, his loyalty, would end up being his downfall. He was about to make a choice that would change everything. He really put his money where his mouth was, in two big ways. First, he put his life on the line, serving as a captain for the king. Then, in 1642, he took a massive political gamble. He personally walked a pro-royalist petition right into a parliament that was becoming more and more anti-king. This was a direct and really dangerous act of defiance. And this, right here, this perfectly captures how he thought. These are his own words from a poem he wrote. He's basically telling his beloved that his duty, his honor, is forcing him to go to war. For a guy like Lovelace, love and loyalty weren't really separate things. They were all tied up together, and honor was the most important piece of the puzzle. So that bold move of walking into Parliament with that petition? Yeah, that had some pretty immediate consequences. Lovelace was arrested, and that's what sets the stage for one of the most powerful and paradoxical moments in all of literature. The year is 1642. For his defiance, Lovelace gets thrown into prison. And just like that, his glittering career, his freedom, it was all gone. I mean, think about it. You can lock up a person, you can take away their money and their future, but can you really, truly cage their mind? That's the exact question Lovelace was facing in that cell. And this is his timeless answer, written while he was locked up. Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. It became his anthem of defiance. What he's saying is that real freedom is something that happens on the inside. A free mind can turn a prison cell into a place of peace, like a sanctuary. It's just an incredible declaration of liberty right in the face of being physically trapped. So Lovelace did get out of prison, but the world he came back to was just falling apart. The Civil War was getting worse, and his unwavering loyalty was about to cost him absolutely everything he had left. Just look how fast things went downhill. He gets wounded in battle, then thrown in prison a second time, and then in 1649, the worst possible thing happens. His king is executed. His entire cause is just gone. He's forced to sell off his family's property bit by bit until there's nothing left. And just a few years later, he dies, completely broke. The contrast is just staggering. It's night and day, right? The man who started out as the shining example of wealth and fame ended his life totally broke, living on handouts, and dying completely forgotten. The handsome, celebrated poet became a pauper. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, he got hit with a devastating personal blow. The woman he wrote all those poems about, Lucasta, heard a rumor that he'd been killed in battle. Believing he was gone for good, she married someone else. So, his life ends in tragedy, forgotten by the very world he once lit up. But hold on, that's not where the story really ends. You see, his real legacy wasn't in his land or his fancy titles. It was in his words. You've got this first line, it perfectly sums up the principle that guided his entire life, and in the end, destroyed it. That unbreakable commitment to his personal code of honor. It was the creed he lived and died by. And then you have this one, which captures that unstoppable spirit that found freedom even when he'd lost everything. His honor defined his actions, and his mind defined his freedom. Those two ideas, they're the pillars of his whole story. So when you boil it all down, the ultimate irony is this. The Cavalier who lost it all, his money, his cause, his love, his life, well, he managed to achieve a kind of immortality through his poetry. His art gave him a fame that was way more lasting than his fortune ever could have been. And it leaves you with this incredible question, doesn't it? In the case of Richard Lovelace, a man whose life was just one tragic loss after another, the answer seems to be a definite yes. His story makes you think that while fortunes disappear and causes get lost, maybe, just maybe, words are the only thing that can truly last forever. You've almost certainly heard this famous quote about freedom, but what you probably don't know is that the man who wrote it was actually locked in a prison cell. And trust me, that context changes everything. Yep, there it is. Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. It's this beautiful, defiant statement about how the human mind can just soar above its physical surroundings. It's the kind of line that makes you feel totally invincible. Because he was. And that one single fact completely transforms this line from a nice, philosophical thought into this breathtaking act of rebellion, written from the inside of a cold, hard prison cell. So, to really get the sheer power behind these words, we need to understand the man who wrote them, a guy named Richard Lovelace, and the incredibly dangerous political stand that got him locked up in the first place. Now, this wasn't for some petty crime. Lovelace was a man who stood for something, and his imprisonment was 100% political. It was the direct result of him taking a very public and, as it turns out, a very risky stand. So, you have to picture it. England is right on the verge of a bloody civil war. The tension between King Charles I and Parliament is at a boiling point. Lovelace, who is fiercely loyal to the king, sided with him against this rising tide of parliamentary power. By handing over a petition that basically defended the king's authority, he was poking the bear, and that single act of loyalty cost him his freedom. And to really get why he would do something like that, you have to understand the world he came from. He was what's known as a Cavalier poet. And believe me, that was a lot more than just a fancy title. These guys weren't just artists scribbling away in an attic. No, they were courtiers, they were soldiers, they were aristocrats, royalists, right down to their bones. Their poetry was all about elegance, celebrating love, honor, and the good things in life. But here's the kicker. It was all written with this chilling awareness that their entire world was about to be completely shattered by war. And this is what creates this incredible tension in their work. On one hand, you get these beautiful, joyful verses about love and friendship. But bubbling right under the surface, there's this deep, almost claustrophobic feeling of being trapped, of loss. They were desperately trying to celebrate beauty while the darkness was literally closing in all around them. Which brings us right back to Gatehouse Prison, where all that tension becomes intensely personal for Lovelace. Physically trapped, completely powerless, he does the only thing he can. He picks up his pen and writes his masterpiece, To Althea from Prison. And this thing, it's not just a poem, it's a weapon, a tool he uses to mentally break out and reclaim his own freedom. So his first move is to claim a freedom that no walls can ever contain, the freedom you find in love. He imagines his beloved, Althea, coming to the prison bars, and in that moment, in his own mind, he argues that he is freer than any living thing on earth. I mean, listen to that. He's saying that even the birds flying free in the sky have no idea what real liberty is compared to what he feels in his love for Althea, even if it's only in his imagination. It's such a powerful first shot at his captors, basically yelling, "You can't jail my spirit." But he doesn't stop there. He keeps building his case. He finds freedom not just in romance, but in friendship, in camaraderie. He pictures himself drinking with his friends, their hearts bound together by what he calls loyal flames. In that shared memory, he finds another kind of freedom that can't be broken. And again, he claims that even the fish swimming free in the ocean can't possibly know the kind of liberty he and his friends share.
He's hammering this point home again and again. The freedom you feel in your heart and mind will always, always be greater than just physical freedom. And then he brings it all home. He makes the crucial connection, tying the whole poem back to the very reason he's in prison. His ultimate freedom, he says, is his loyalty. It's his ability to sing his king's praises, a right that no prison cell in the world can ever take away from him. This is just a brilliant, final act of defiance. He compares himself to a caged songbird, but then he claims that from inside his cell, his praise for the king can fly higher and freer than the wind itself. It's the absolute perfect setup for the poem's immortal conclusion. This incredibly powerful idea that your mind can be free even when your body is caged has echoed down through the centuries. But what about Lovelace himself? What happened to him? And here is the great irony of the whole story. Despite writing one of the most famous couplets in the entire English language, Lovelace himself, he was never really considered a major poet. In his own time, he was kind of overlooked, completely overshadowed by his contemporaries. But then you look at this. The poet might have been seen as minor, but the central idea from his little prison poem, it had a massive, major, and lasting impact, showing up in the work of authors from Charlotte Bronte all the way to Margaret Atwood. It just goes to show you that the power of an idea has absolutely nothing to do with how famous its author is. It's really an incredible story, isn't it? Lovelace, the minor poet, was trapped by walls and eventually he just kind of faded into history. But his idea, that powerful idea that was forged in a prison cell, it broke free. It achieved a kind of immortality that he never could. For Lovelace, the answer was love. It was loyalty to his friends, an allegiance to his cause. He found freedom in his mind, in his soul, and his poem leaves all of us with a question that's just as powerful today. When we're faced with our own walls, whatever they may be, what is it that makes us truly free?
All right, let's get right into one of literature's biggest dilemmas. We're talking about that classic, brutal choice between love and honor. And today, we're looking at a poem that tackles it head-on.
Seriously, just think about it for a second. It's a tough one, isn't it? What do you value more? Do you follow your heart, or do you follow what you feel is a higher calling, a sense of duty? That's the exact conflict we're digging into here.
And the setting for this is so important. We're talking 1649. England is literally tearing itself apart during the Civil War. Our poet, Richard Lovelace, he's a royalist, a Cavalier, and he feels he has to go fight. So he writes this poem for the woman he loves, not just to say, sorry, I'm leaving, but to argue why it's the only thing he can possibly do.
So, to really get what he's arguing, I think we need to hear it from the man himself. This is his poem, To Lucasta, Going to the Wars.
You see how he starts off so gently. He calls her sweet. He knows this whole thing looks unkind. And just listen to the imagery he uses for her world. A nunnery, a place that's pure, peaceful, chaste. It's this perfect sanctuary that he is actively choosing to leave for the total chaos of a battlefield.
And then, bam! Here's the twist. He basically says, yeah, it's true, I'm chasing a new mistress. But this mistress, it isn't another woman. It's war itself. He says he's embracing a sword, a horse, and a shield with a stronger faith than he showed her. I mean, wow, that is a bold, almost risky thing to say to your beloved.
And this brings us to that killer final stanza. He claims that this betrayal, this inconstancy, is something she will actually grow to adore. Why? Because the only reason he can love her so deeply is because he loves honor even more. It's an incredible paradox.
Okay, so he's laid out his entire case. Now, let's pull it apart and see how he builds this amazing argument, starting with the woman who inspired it all.
You know, even her name is doing some serious work in this poem, Lucasta. It's not just a random name. It comes from the Latin lux casta, which means pure light. It just doubles down on all that imagery of her being this beacon of goodness. And here's a little historical footnote. It's widely believed she was a real person, Lucy Sacheverell. The story goes she heard a false rumor that Lovelace died in battle, and she ended up marrying someone else. Kind of tragic.
So,
What Lovelace does is he paints this picture of two completely different universes that he's stuck between. You've got Lucasta's world on one side, it's a sanctuary, it's quiet, it's pure devotion, and on the other side, you've got the world of war. It's violent, it's chaotic, and he even calls it a rival mistress. The contrast is just, it's extreme.
And you've got to appreciate this part. Lovelace was an absolute master of wordplay. He uses these really subtle tricks to link these two opposite worlds together. The word chaste, which describes her purity, gets twisted into the word chase, as in chasing his new mistress, war. And the loving arms of his beloved are replaced by the military arms, weapons, that he's taking up. It's just so clever.
Okay, let's get to the real heart of the poem, the thing that makes it tick. Let's dig into that central, powerful paradox.
These two lines, this is the entire engine of the poem. There's a reason they've been quoted for centuries. They capture this incredibly complex, really challenging idea about what love and duty are all about.
On the surface, it sounds like a total contradiction, right? How can loving something else more possibly be proof of his love for her? It seems crazy. So let's actually unpack the logic he's using.
Okay, so here's how his argument works. Step 1 is simple. His sense of honor, his duty, is forcing him to go to war. He can't ignore it. But then, step 2, and this is the genius part. He says that this commitment to honor is the very quality that makes him a good man, the man she fell in love with. He's basically saying, look, if I was the kind of guy who would abandon my duty just to stay here with you in comfort, I wouldn't be worthy of your pure love anyway.
And that brilliant little twist of logic is exactly why this short 12-line poem has had such a massive impact, and why it's still seen as a perfect example of Cavalier poetry.
At the end of the day, that's the poem's real genius. It completely reframes the whole situation. He's not choosing war over her. He's arguing that his deep commitment to honor is what makes his love for her valuable in the first place. Duty isn't the rival of love. In his mind, it's the source code.
And just to put it all on a timeline for you, he probably wrote this poem around 1640, right in the thick of things. But it wasn't actually published until 1649, in a collection that he very fittingly called Lucasta. It was born right out of the turmoil of war, and it's lasted for centuries as this perfect snapshot of that conflict between your private life and your public duty.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Lovelace's honor was all tied up in ideas of chivalry, loyalty to the king, and going to war. But what does that concept even look like for us today? What's the principle or the career or the personal calling that someone today might argue is the very thing that makes their love worthwhile, even if it pulls them away? It's definitely something to think about.